Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live today. I am Liz Isaacson. I am also go by Elena Johnson. I kind of go by both names. My real name is Elena Johnson. I am acting as Liz today. So I put Liz Isaacson on there. Sometimes I like to assume my alternate identity. I wanted to drop into our reader community today, say hi to everyone. If you're here watching live, awesome. And you can post comments, and I usually see them over on the side. And we're just going to be reading one of my all-time favorite parts of a book coming out next week called His Sixth Sweetheart. His Sixth Sweetheart. So it's a sixth book in the series. This series all has like first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So 5 books are out. They come out about every 6 months, one in December and one in June, although there's a little change with the 7th book that's coming. And I don't know how many books there will be in this because I kind of did one generation and then I skipped a bunch of years and I'm kind of doing a second generation too, kind of. It's a complicated series because it's tied to Coral Canyon, which if you are reading the Coral Canyon Cowboys, you see Wes Hammond quite a lot in those. Bryce teaches guitar lessons to Ames's son. Ames Hammond is one of the Hammond brothers. And then the Ivory Peaks series is all Gray Hammond, and he is the middle brother. No, he is the second oldest. Colton is the middle brother. Gray's book is third in his series. His series is the Christmas at Whiskey Mountain Lodge in Coral Canyon. And he's book 3. His book is called Her Cowboy Billionaire Best Friend's Brother. And he marries Elise, has a long distance relationship with Elise in that book, runs a lot of marathons. And then they kind of settle back in Coral, in Ivory Peaks, where all the Hammonds are from. They're from the Denver area. But all of his brothers have relocated to Coral Canyon except for him, and him and Elise go up to Coral Canyon every summer. So that's where it's kind of this sort of convoluted family tree that comes to Ivory Peaks. And the first book is called His First Love, and it's a second generation. It's Hunter. So Hunter is Gray's oldest son from his first marriage, and we see Hunter throughout all the Hammond brothers books. So all 5 of those books, you see Hunter as like an 11-year-old to about 15. Those books takes place about 4 years, and you see Hunter there. And so then in this book, I advanced time, I think 10 years, maybe 12. And Hunter is now done with MIT. He's a super smart scientist guy. He comes back and starts to work for his family company, which is a science company in the Denver area. And then he becomes the CEO. And so it's his second chance romance with Molly. This is book 1. And book 2 and book 3 feature Cowboys brothers, the Wetsteins, on the ranch, the farm that Gray has hired to kind of run his farm in the summer when he's gone. And so that's Matt and Boone. And then book 4 is Travis Thatcher. And I have one of those. I don't have the other 2, but the second one's called His Second Chance. The third one's called His Third Try. This one is called His Fourth Date. Travis also works the ranch, and he goes on a speed dating event and meets Poppy, who does not like him because he paid her mortgage for her and makes her feel bad. And they've kind of had a back and forth, but they live next door to each other, and he ends up falling in love with her, boy next door thing. And at that point, I was like, if I want to keep doing more here, and I do, I'd set up Cord Bear. I'd set him up already with Jane, but they are quite a bit different in age. They have a little altercation, I think, in this book, His Fourth Date, when Jane's 14 and Cor's 25. So she's still a teenager and he's an adult. And so I was like, we got to do something to kind of advance the time. So I did advance time again between book 4 and book 5. And Jane's 29 now. And so it's been about another 13 years. But actually, it's only, been 13. But for book 5, it was actually Mike and Gertie. So, and Mike is Wes's son. So it's sort of this second generation and then another second generation. Because Gray had Hunter and then he has other kids, but they're like 15 years apart. And then I used Mike, who's Wes's son. So that's still second generation. Gertie is actually Boone's son, Boone from the 3rd book. So there's quite a lot of family tree roots going on here, and it's easy to get confused. But his 5th date is Mike and Gertie. And then not 5th date, his 5th kiss is Mike and Gertie. and his recovery from his shoulder injury and all that. And then we are going to be talking about his sixth sweetheart, which is Cord Bear and Jane Hammond. So that's Gray's son. So in this series, we have three Hammonds, Hunter, Mike, and Jane. And then we have three other cowboys on the ranch. And book 7 is going to be Keith Wetstein, who is Matt's son. So they're sort of second generation inside of second generation, and they're all tied to Coral Canyon. And we go back to Coral Canyon a lot, especially in Jane's book. She did not like going to Coral Canyon as a teenager. Her mom and dad made them pack up and leave the day after school ended, and they were gone all summer long, and they came back the day before school started, and she basically never saw her friends and lost a lot of her friends, and she didn't like that. And she hasn't been back to Coral Canyon since she graduated from high school. But she starts dating Cord. And so they are dating, and Cord is an interesting character. I don't want to give away too much of Cord, but as I was writing him, I love him so much. But he's had very, very few experiences because I think if you have read the series, you know that Cord has some sort of past. And so he's basically had this bad past that you find out about in the book, and then he's lived at the Hammond family farm. And that's it. And so Jane starts exposing him to all kinds of things like road trips and the protocol for road trips and going to national parks, which seems like maybe something that everyone would do, and he hasn't done it. So one of my all-time favorite scenes is they decide Jane's going to take him to Coral Canyon. She asks him to come to Coral Canyon with her for a visit for the summer, and not the whole summer. He's going to come for like 7 or 10 days. And as part of that, Jane wants to introduce him to all of these wonderful Coral Canyon things, her life there, her family, because all of her uncles live there. And of course, her mom and dad have gone for the summer as well. All of her cousins are there. So we get to see a lot of the Hammond kids, kind of grown up in their 20s is where they are now. You even get to see the Walkers in this book. So if you've read Seven Sons in Three Rivers, Seven Sons Ranch in Three Rivers, you will see Wyatt and Marcy and their kids who are now grown, because we advanced time for Hunter, we advanced time for Mike and Jane. And so it's been about 25 years. And so their kids are grown up too. And so you'll get to see them as well. So it's kind of fun. We kind of tie all those together, and sometimes my brain explodes. But I wanted to read one of my all-time favorite chapters and scenes from the book. It happens to be chapter 23. I don't think it will give anything away, but Jane has planned a couple of days in Yellowstone for Cord, and he's never been there. And they're planning on camping overnight one night and doing stuff both days and then driving back to Coral Canyon, because the gate of Yellowstone is not that far away, because they're about an hour from Jackson, and then they just go up into Yellowstone. So this is it. I'm just going to start reading, and then I will come back and see if there are any comments and things, but I have to look at my other screen to do it. Okay. So let me see. I was going to put something up though. Let me see if I can find it. I was going to see if this covers my face or not. Oh, no. Perfect. I'm just going to move it this way so that I'm not covered up by that. I've got to go this way. There's the book. Isn't it so golden and beautiful? It's called His Sixth Sweetheart. If you haven't ordered it yet, you can pre-order it on Amazon. And the rest of the series is $1 more. I'm going to raise the price after it comes out, and it is in KU. And if you haven't read this series, start with His First Love, and you'll have lots of books to go to from there, because the Coral Canyon books are all connected. And let's see, how many books are in Coral Canyon now? 20? There's 8 in the first series, 5 in the second. That's 13. There's 7 so far, actually 8, if you count Mav, who's not on retailers, but Mav is on my website. So there's 21 books in Coral Canyon now, and there's 2 more young brothers coming. And then, excuse me, if you count these Ivory Peaks books as Coral Canyon books, there's going to be 6 more of those. Lots of places for you to go, lots of cowboys to fall in love with, big families to join. So let's look at chapter 23. It's right there, Jane said, swinging around in her seat as Cord went by. Pull over when you can. We'll walk back to it. Giddy, she faced the front. Everyone on this stretch of road in Yellowstone National Park knew about the moose here and had pulled over to see it. Even if they didn't, they would when they went by. Cord eased the SUV off the road to the shoulder, and Jane hurried to shove her feet back into her shoes. He met her on her side of the car, the binoculars around his neck. I don't think you'll need those, she said. It was in the river. I saw it. They hadn't gone too far past it, and Jane led the way along the road back to the bigger group of people. Hardly anyone spoke, and when they did, it was in a whisper. She liked the reverence paid to the wildlife, and she pointed for Cord as if he couldn't see the enormous moose standing in the river eating the willows that grew along the bank. Incredible, Cord breathed. I've never seen a moose before. Jane leaned back into his chest, liking the way he anchored her there by putting a hand on her hip and holding her tight. He'd never been to Yellowstone either. He'd never eaten huckleberry ice cream. He'd never hiked in the Teton Mountains. He'd never gone apple picking. He'd never seen a therapy dog academy. Well, now he'd done all those things. And tonight they'd have their tent setting up contest, and Jane was sure she'd be all the way in love with him before they returned to Coral Canyon. He simply made everything more fun. Maybe it was because of how new and shiny every experience was for him. Maybe it was because she got to see him go through those experiences for the first time. Heck, he'd never played air hockey before, and he'd never eaten dessert before dinner. The moose moved, and a ripple of excitement ran through the crowd as a smaller one emerged from the tangle of branches where it had been hiding. Two moose, she whispered, gleeful. God had been answering her prayers left and right on this trip, and she once again found herself offering thanks to him for allowing them to be in this spot at this time to see these moose. People continued to come and go, taking their fill of the moose. Eventually, Cord and Jane went back to the SUV and continued toward Lewis Lake, where they'd been planning to eat lunch. She had the schedule for Old Faithful on her phone, and she wanted to make sure they at least stopped to see the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone from the overlook. She hoped to see herds of bison as they drove north through the park to their campground, but Jane would be happy and satisfied with the trip already. She'd slid off her shoes the moment Cord closed her door, and she continued to look for wildlife as Cord drove. Uncle Wes should be getting the last signature from Otis Young that day, and then he'd told Jane he'd give the guitar to Daddy, who'd put it in the closet in her bedroom. Cord had no reason to be in there, and his birthday was only a few days from now anyway. I wish we were staying here longer, she said as he carried the cooler to the picnic table they'd found at the lake. It's so beautiful. She continued past the picnic table to the edge of the area, the wind coming off the water actually a little chilly. She flipped up the hood of her sweatshirt, glad she'd brought warmer clothes. Of course, the sweatshirt was so long it nearly covered her shorts and left her legs bare, but Jane could somehow tolerate that more than she could something cold around her neck and ears. Come eat, Janie, he said, and she turned back to him. She smiled at the red and white checkered cloth he'd spread over the table, and when he looked up from where he currently clipped it in the corner, he added, You said you liked something a little different. I did, she said warily. Cord had taken care of all of the food for their 2-day trip to the national park. He'd borrowed 2 coolers from her parents, and he'd done all the shopping and prep himself. Jane felt very cared for as she sat at the table and he put a container of fresh fruit in front of her. And he reached into the cooler and produced a can of whipped cream she could spray onto her strawberries. Jane lit up and picked up the can. Thank you, baby. She tipped her face back for a kiss, but he didn't linger long. The sandwiches today are a little out there, he said, but I've been having so many new experiences that I thought it would be fun for you to have one. He plucked out 2 sandwiches, and they looked like they had egg salad on them. Jane didn't particularly love egg salad, but she didn't hate it either. What is this? She asked, because it wasn't exactly what she pictured when she thought of an egg salad sandwich. This is something I remember my grandma making for me exactly one time, he said. I don't remember why. I don't remember where we were. We ate outside, and I vaguely remember lunch came after a walk. I was little, probably 5 or 6 maybe. He glowed as he spoke, and Jane realized that not all of his memories from his childhood and teen years were bad. It's Spam and egg salad, he said. Not as sloppy as egg salad, better texture. He unzipped the top of his bag and poked his sandwich out the top. It has a little dill pickle in it, and I know you love those. He transformed his smile into a big bite of his sandwich, his joy flowing out of him and into her. He moaned. That made Jane laugh, and she abandoned her fruit in favor of her sandwich. All right, she said, you've got me curious now. She opened her sandwich and sniffed it in an overdramatic way. Cord only chuckled, and deeming it poison-free, Jane took a bite. Much smaller than his, of course, but she got enough to experience the pop of mustard, the sour dill, the creamy mayo, and the texture of both spam and egg. Her eyes widened and she looked over to him. This is good. She took another bite while he glowed and glowed and glowed. I'm glad you like it, he said in a husky voice. It's about time we have something we both like. Jane finished chewing and set down her sandwich. She picked up the can of whipped cream. What does that mean? We like a lot of the same things. Seeing moose, he said, and walking around the lake, she added, and all those onion rings last night, and apple picking. That was amazingly fun. She cocked her eyebrows at him. Just because I'm living out of a bag and you refuse to put sugar in your coffee doesn't mean we don't have shared interests. You don't want to hike anywhere, he said. You like driving me around. She lifted her eyebrows again. Don't you? Yeah, he said as he reached for a bag of potato chips. I sure do, Janie. If you want to go hiking, I said you could, Jane said. Chris and Tommy are practically itching for you to go. Her cousins had been nothing but kind and accepting of Cord, and Jane watched him for his reaction. Why don't you want to go with them? He gave her a look out of the corner of his eye. Jane, they're younger than you. So what? I feel like I could be their daddy. I don't know. It's weird. Jane sprayed cream all over her berries, trying to decide if she should say the words in her head or not. She never held much back, but she tried to speak as kindly as she said. It's only weird to you, Cord. They're not even thinking about it. They just want to do something with you because you're cool. Cool? He scoffed and then laughed. I don't think so, Janie. I do, she said. Tommy said right to me. I like him, Jane. He's so cool. She held her hand to her heart. I swear on everything I am, he said that. Cord watched her for several long moments, casually popping chips into his mouth. She'd been with him long enough to know that he needed some space and quiet to think, but he never took too long to come to a conclusion. He wasn't afraid to say hard things either, and Jane really liked that. He spoke softer than she did, and he calmed her when she started going off the rails. She liked that too. In fact, there was very little about Cord she didn't like. All right, he said as he brushed salt and crumbs from his hand. I'll text him right now. You got his number? Yep, she said. You just can't go on the evening of the 4th or any time on the 6th. Are you going to tell me what we're doing on my birthday? No, she said, so stop asking. You're mine all day long. That's all you need to know. He gazed at her, the roughness in his expression turning soft. I'm yours every day, Jane. All day, every day. He couldn't have said anything better, and Jane leaned forward and touched her mouth to his. You keep saying things like that, Cord, and I'm going to fall completely. Good, he said roughly. She wasn't sure how she was supposed to drive him to the airport on the 7th, kiss him goodbye, and not see him for 3 more weeks. She reminded herself that her mama and daddy had dated long distance for months before mama had moved to the Denver area to keep dating daddy. She could survive for 3 weeks. Maybe, she told herself as she rattled off Chris's number. It's already getting dark, she said as Cord pulled into their assigned campground. Maybe we shouldn't have stayed at Old Faithful so long. It was so amazing, he said. I couldn't leave. He got out of the SUV. It'll be fast, okay? But even as he glanced up into the sky, shivered in the wind, and then darted around to the back of the car. Jane quickly put on her shoes and joined him, but she had a much harder time carrying her tent. Why did they have to make them so heavy? Hey, she said, huffing and puffing when she finally reached the spot where she needed to put up her tent. You started already. I bet we have maybe 20 minutes of daylight left, he said, and there are no streetlights here, Jane. He bent over the bag of canvas and rods he'd already unearthed. So I deem you the winner of the tent setting up contest. I just want to get it done so we have somewhere to sleep. Jane looked at her bag helplessly. Would it be faster if I helped you? Yes, he said, thrusting a bag of poles toward her. Open these and get them put together. He glanced over to her. Please. Jane didn't mind the take charge attitude, and she did what Cord said. He read the directions, as according to him, he'd never set up a tent before. Hunter used to put them up in the backyard or the meadows surrounding the farmhouse, and he'd sleep out there with all the kids for nights on end. Jane could remember crying when her mother had insisted she come inside the house and shower, then brush her teeth. This goes here, he said, feeding the pole through the runners along the tent. Put it in the flap at the bottom there. See it? Yes, Jane said, relief flooding her. Got it. Working together, they had the tent set up in a little over 10 minutes, and Cord looked at her. The twilight continued to fade. His expression turned as dark as the night was becoming around them. I think we're going to have to call this good, he said. We still have to blow up the airbed and get dinner out. I have a lantern, she said. I have a flashlight on my phone. We can get set up inside the tent with those. Lanterns aren't safe in tents, he said. It's an electric one. She turned and started jogging back to the car. I'll get it all. He joined her and they got their camping gear out. They'd both brought a sleeping bag and a pillow, and Jane had brought 2 extra pillows and an extra blanket. She'd taken a page out of Cord's book and actually checked the weather to be prepared for tonight's campground experience. Cord lugged the boxed air mattress he'd bought in Coral Canyon over to the tent, and Jane said, "I'll get the cooler out and get started on dinner." "You'll need a fire, sweetheart," he said, his voice strained. "Give me a minute, okay? I'll get it all going for us." Jane couldn't really carry the cooler herself anyway, and they couldn't leave it out overnight because of the bears. She looked left and right up and down the camp road, but she couldn't see anything in either direction. A sudden chill moved through her because anything could be lurking out there in the dark woods. Wolves, bears, mountain lions. "Jane," Corn said, and she spun back to him. "Help me find some small kindling, okay?" He had built a fire before because Jane had seen him do it plenty of times for the big backyard bonfires her parents hosted throughout the autumn after they'd returned from Coral Canyon. She switched on the flashlight on her phone and got to work, gathering up small sticks and twigs, then branches of pine needles. Dry pine needles. Cord collected larger pieces of wood, and in another 10 minutes, he had a merrily dancing fire burning in the clearly marked pit. "All right," he said, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I already have the tinfoil dinners made up. They take about an hour, but we can't put them in until we have some good coals." He wrapped her up in a hug. "Are you starving? Gonna make it?" "I'm okay," she said, but she shivered in his arms. He held her tightly and whispered, "We're gonna use the same tent, sweetheart, but I'll behave myself, okay? Separate sleeping bags and all that." "Okay," she whispered. "I'm not worried about it, Cord." And she wasn't. "I just feel dumb that we didn't plan this better. I really wanted to beat you at setting up a tent." He chuckled, and some of Jane's fears of what could be out there in the dark dissipated. "I'll go set up the air mattress. I'll go get out the hot chocolate supplies in the chairs." An hour later, Jane sat with a paper plate in her lap, her delicious tinfoil dinner of a hamburger, potato wedges, and green beans properly seasoned and perfectly cooked. "This is so good," she said. "I can't even cook with a stove and an oven. I don't know how you do this." Cord smiled at her, and Jane decided she'd never had a better day in her life. Even though she wore a sweatshirt with the hood up, had a blanket draped over her legs, and currently ate outside, it was still the absolute best day ever. "We saw moose today," she said. "And an amazing canyon," he said. "Old Faithful, that bald eagle, buffalo in the mist." Cord chuckled and said, "You can't beat a herd of buffalo in the mist." Jane couldn't stop smiling, and when she eventually did crawl into her sleeping bag and snuggled down into her extra blanket, she rolled toward Cord. "Baby, the best part about today wasn't the moose or the canyon or the geyser." "No?" he murmured. "What was it?" The air mattress made it hard to stay on his side, and Jane ended up pressing right against him, plenty of fabric and layers between them. Pure darkness covered them, and Jane couldn't see anything, not one single thing. It almost made it feel like Cord wasn't there, that whatever she said, no one would be able to hear except for her. "It was being with you," she whispered drowsily. "I love being with you." She hoped she hadn't given away too much, but at the same time, she didn't care if she had. She told this man she was falling for him. He kissed her like he could be falling for her too. And that was definitely a new experience for Jane, and she wanted a brand new life full of amazing, one-of-a-kind experiences, but only with Cord. Oh, that was chapter 23. I love that chapter. I don't know why I love it so much. When it came to me that I was going to have them go to Coral Canyon and go to Yellowstone, I was like, "Oh, Yellowstone." I love Yellowstone. I don't know if you have been there before, but all of those things that happen there, I have experienced. I've seen the crowds and how reverent they are. We got to see these moose in the river. We've gotten to the campground late and had to set up tents in the almost dark. My mother-in-law brings spam and egg sandwiches on campouts. She did that when my kids were little, and we were doing all these campouts for my son to do a lot of his Cub Scout and Boy Scout pass-offs and things. And so I just took so much of kind of me and my experiences going to Yellowstone and camping and kind of put them in there for Jane and Cord. And I just love it. I love that chapter, and I hope that you will love his sixth sweetheart and all the experiences that Jane and Cord get to have together as they, spoiler alert, fall in love. Like, spoiler alert, it's a romance novel, so they're going to end up together. And anyway, I hope you liked that. And oh, thank you for the comments. Beautiful cover. What a delicious sandwich. I do have a recipe for it. So I might, it's not in the back of the book right now, but maybe I'll put that in there so that you guys can have it, or put it in my book club or in my reader community so you guys can have that. Um, I like Elena's narration better than those who. Okay, that's just crazy, Lynette. My voice is not good for that, but I did the best I could. I don't do voices. I don't super love audiobooks that have voices for the males and females. I just want to read it and kind of hear it myself. But thank you. That was very kind. And Denise said, fantastic chapter. I love your reading of it. Thank you so much. Anyway, that was one of my favorite things to write for his Sick Sweetheart. I loved writing that chapter, and it was just so easy. And we drove down the road and it was all misty over the river and all these buffalo were there. So buffaloes in the mist started to get really long. I don't know if that was long for you. That chapter is about 3,000 words. And I thought, I can't put in every little thing. So I kind of summarized it at the end with buffaloes in the mist and the geyser and the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. If you haven't been to Yellowstone, it's amazing. And I hope you can go one day, or at least look some pictures up, because it's an amazing thing to go up there and be in that nature and feel how darkness can be. I remember we camped right across from the bathrooms, and I thought, thank goodness, because if I have to get up in the night, which I always do, I don't want to be wandering in the dark. There's darkness there like you cannot comprehend. So it's just amazing. And so I love that chapter. I hope you do too. If you haven't pre-ordered his Sick Sweetheart, I hope you will. I'll put a link in the comments. Maybe I can do it right here. I forget that I can comment from this side of the chat. And I don't want to take a bunch of your time today. This book comes out next Tuesday. It will release into KU. And you can read it there if you want to. And of course, the ARC team has it. So we've been getting some reviews. Paperback is live. So there are some reviews on Amazon, and you can order it in paperback right now. I ordered mine. Mine will be here on Friday. And I know this release has kind of gotten overshadowed by Gem, because Gem just barely came out. And I don't know why I do 2 releases in 1 month. Anyway, it's been kind of overshadowed, and I thought, I don't want Cord to be overshadowed. Cord turned out to be one of my all-time favorite heroes. He is just so good. He's just so good. And he's calm and he's quiet and he's just perfect. He's just perfect for Jane. And I hope that you'll be able to see that in the pages as well. This person says, LF Petrock, I enjoyed this. I've been through all those fun things at Yellowstone also. Yay. I read like you do, so it was great. No voices, no go back and pronounce something different. Just stop and take a breath. Yep. Anyway, it's summertime. This book takes place in the summer for the most part. Cord's birthday is in the summer. It's July 6th. And I just hope you love the book as much as I loved writing it. And I hope you have a great day today as well. I will see you later.